Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Prepped and Polished Podcast. I'm your host, Alexis Avila, licensed guidance counselor, private tutor, and founder of Prepped and Polished LLC Tutoring and Test Prep here in beautiful South Natick, Massachusetts. Prepped and Polished Podcast is your educational insider. Our show is brought to you by Prepped and Polished LLC, where I'm the principal educator. To learn more about our firm, please visit preppedandpolished.com. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the program. We appreciate you taking interest in the information we provide to families and educators around the globe. For future shows, upcoming dates, and ongoing relevant education news, please join our Facebook community by searching Prepped and Polished and clicking like. And you can follow us on Twitter at Prepped Polished. And joining our show today is Lorena Knapp. Lorena is a medevac helicopter pilot and professional writer, coach, and speaker living in Alaska. Her career as a helicopter pilot was featured in Alaska magazine. And recently, Lorena did a wonderful TEDx talk entitled, Get Uncomfortable Living in the Yellow. Her professional coaching website and blog, Big State, Big Life, and I'll give you that information a little later, shows you how you can manage your fear, vulnerability, and uncertainty so you can live a life that matters. Lorena has an undergraduate degree in biology from University of California, Santa Cruz, a master's in teaching from Alaska Pacific University, and she received the airline transport rating, which is highest rating for an airline pilot. We're delighted to have Lorena on our show. She's going to share with us her life experiences that have led her to a career as a motivational speaker and give us tips on how we can live a braver life. But before we start, I want to make sure our listeners have our contact info. Our email address is radio@preppedandpolished.com. If you'd like to submit a question at any time, you can use that email address. Often our listeners will have questions as they're listening or afterward, and we always appreciate hearing from our listeners, so you can email us at any time, radio@preppedandpolished.com. Lorena, are you on the line?
I'm here. Good morning, Alexis.
Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I am doing really well. It's not quite light here yet this morning in Alaska, but it will be soon.
Wow, that's fascinating. My first question was just in the East Coast here, we recently got a blizzard, but my guess is our snow's nothing compared to yours. How's the weather over there right now?
It's actually been a little bit warmer than normal recently. It's been an interesting winter weather this winter. Like everywhere, I think we've had both much colder weather than we would normally have by now and then warmer weather. So yesterday, it probably was warmer here than in a lot of places. It was about 30 degrees yesterday.
Wow. So, Lorena, you're a medevac helicopter pilot. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So my job is, you want to kind of think of me as the driver of the ambulance that just happens to be going in the air. I fly with a paramedic and a nurse, and then we have room on board. I fly what's called an AS-350 or an A-Star helicopter, and we have room for one patient on board, which would sit next to me. So it's not a huge ambulance, but we are able to accommodate and have the technology to be able to take care of various types of medical emergencies.
Wow. And was becoming a pilot something you always wanted to do since you were a child?
No, actually. So I did grow up here in Alaska, and although it probably seems unusual, it's not that unusual up here to have an airplane that families would just use recreationally. And so when I was a kid, my dad had an airplane. He had a Cessna 185. It was just something that we used. It's kind of like the RV in Alaska or something like that a family might have. And so we would take trips on the weekends, and he was never a professional pilot. And so when I imagined a professional pilot, what I imagined was someone who was flying a 737, and that didn't seem very interesting for me. It wasn't something that I really wanted to do. So I always knew that I would fly, and I really kind of started flying when I was in middle school, and I would just fly along with my dad. But it wasn't something that I ever imagined as a career. I just thought it would be a hobby on the side. And then what happened was I ended up getting all of my fixed wing ratings, so I was and I mean, I had my private fixed wing rating hadn't gone that far, and I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that I was like really driven by. I'm really passionate about. But then I took a helicopter ride, and I was like, oh, I really want to do this. The problem with helicopters is that they are so expensive that there's just no way that people can really afford to do that as a hobby. It's just not something that people can do. And so for me, what that meant was I was going to have to change careers if I wanted to fly a helicopter. And at the time, I was a teacher. I taught elementary school. And it was something I enjoyed and I liked, but it wasn't something that I was also super passionate about, not like I am about flying now. So what I had decided at the time was I would go ahead and make my my career my hobby, and my hobby my career. And so flying became the first thing that I do, and something that's really important to me. And now I teach on the side, and that's something I really enjoy, and it works out really well that way.
Wow. And were there any road bumps on your way to becoming a pilot? I know I was thinking, anytime I fly a plane, it's a male pilot, so it is unique to have a female pilot. I don't know if that was one of your roadblocks, being a female, but if you want to share anything along the way, or was it pretty easy?
No, it wasn't easy, and I have to say I'm happy that I didn't know how hard it would be in some ways. And that being said, I would still do it all over again because I really love it that much, and it's worth it for me, especially now. I mean, it was harder earlier on. And like you said, I was an elementary education teacher. Like, that's very much a female-dominated profession. So I switched from a very female-dominated profession to a very male-dominated profession. And it wasn't an easy transition all the time. I was thinking about this morning when I started my flying career in Alaska, but then I ended up leaving and going and finishing flight school in Oregon. It was going to be cheaper and faster, so I decided to do that. And I came home after being away for, 6 or 8 months or something. And my mom said, wow, you talk really differently. And I was thinking, oh, no, I swear more because that's just the helicopter industry, right? And I thought, so you're giving me a hard time for that. And so I said, oh, I'm really, I'm sorry. I know I swear more or whatever. And she said, no. She said, you're much more direct. And that's something that I've really has changed my speech patterns, in that I am much more direct in my communication style. And partly that's aviation, and partly that's, speaking a little bit of a male dialect, if you will. In aviation, you need to, there's not a lot of time to talk about certain things. You just need to make the decision, and you need to act quickly and have it be clear. And so that's part of that as well. So there were some challenges there for sure, just adjusting to that. For a period of time, to build time, I flew offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, and there are very few women that work offshore down there. So there was some interesting challenges there as well. And when I first started, my instructor that I had gotten to be such good friends with, that was my original fixed-wing flight instructor, had said, it's going to be both easier for you and harder for you because you are a female. And I didn't really get it at the time, but it's very true because in some ways people can be a little bit more forgiving and be willing to talk to me, and there's not so much ego involved. But also there are definitely times when people do not want me to be there, and constantly aware of my gender, which is not something that I had ever really been aware of before. And, I don't know if your listeners will see a picture of me, but I don't really, I look young, I'm 39 now in a few weeks. But more than once, I had tour passengers get into my aircraft and go, "You're our pilot?" I was not the visual image that they were expecting to see. So there was a lot of that going on as well. And the actual technical aspects of flying, the aerodynamics of a helicopter are challenging. So that was, there were some parts in there, both the being able to explain it, but then sometimes just being able to do it. It's really like, I think of flying a helicopter like riding your bike. When you first learning to ride your bicycle, you are going to fall down and crash. It's the same way in a helicopter until you figure it out. And really the instructor is there to prevent the crash until you get that feeling of what it is like to fly a helicopter. So it's very humbling in the beginning. You're not good at it naturally.
Wow. I'm sure this is another topic for another day, but you give so much encouragement to anyone who might have fear, trying that one day, becoming a pilot, because you always think you have to be a certain way to become one, but maybe if you really work on it, a lot of people could become a pilot, or maybe not. I have no idea, but.
No, I think so. Even like for some of the students when I was working as a flight instructor, they weren't naturally gifted. But for me, the biggest thing, what is most important, is good decision-making skills. So that if you are not able to do something very well, you know that about yourself. You know that limitation. Like, I don't fly well in, really poor visibility, or, I struggle with landing on a slope. If you know that about yourself, then you could be a good pilot. But if you are sort of not aware of your own weaknesses, that to me is a scary pilot.
Tell us about your website a little bit. Big State, Big Life. What is the foundation of the website that you put together?
Yeah, so it's really a side project for me, but it's something that I really love. And when I think of big state, obviously that's a connection to Alaska, which is a very big state. But also I think of it as a big state of mind, and that's something that I really inspires me, is that I love it when I see people achieving their dreams. And I'm not attached to whatever your dream is. I think that everybody's vision for where they want to be in their life is, that's their own thing. But I love seeing people doing it and actually, accomplishing their dreams and putting themselves out there. And, if you had asked me, are you ever going to be a medevac helicopter pilot? I would have just been like, no, I could never do that. And so now here I am, and obviously, I have taken small steps along the way, but those small steps are the steps that have led me to the career that I'm in now. It's not something that I really imagined from the beginning. I just didn't think that I would be able to do it. And so I know that if I had that feeling, other people had that feeling too, where they were like, oh no, I could never do that. I'm not smart enough, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm not independent enough, or I'm not whatever enough. But I know that you are, it's like I have this feeling like if I can do it, you can do it, and it doesn't have to be helicopters. It can be whatever it is in your life that you're up to. But I know that we place those limitations on ourselves. So for me, and you kind of mentioned my TED Talk earlier, those are the themes that come up in my blog writing, and then also in the TED Talk, is like, you can do this. This is, seeing yourself as able is something that I really work with people on.
Wow. And this is a perfect transition, because I was going to ask you about your TED Talk, and I listened to it, and, you talk about how it's important for people getting comfortable being uncomfortable, or living in the yellow. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this means to you?
Yeah, sure. So for me, it's really about, we want to push ourselves a little bit, but we don't want to push ourselves so far that we've gone too far. And it was actually a reference, when I created that, was a reference to some of my early flight training, where my instructor had said, did you scare yourself yet? As I kind of was out flying solo, and he said, you have to get a little bit uncomfortable to build your skills. You have to kind of try that thing, but you don't want to go so far that you're way in over your head. And so I really like that idea of life. It's not that we have to just go out and say, well, I'm going to go do this, and have it be this really crazy, impossible dream. But, well, what I'm going to go do today is this one thing that makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. But it's not so far out there that I'm just terrified the whole time. And so, that was something that has worked for me, and really I can see working for other people as well, as they sort of take on their dreams and just do a little bit here and there at a time.
No, I really like that. That's a refreshing way to basically say, look, push yourself, but don't be careless about it, And
mm-hmm. And we have that whole thing, about fight and flight and freeze. Like, if you were into that fight, flight, freeze, you have gone way too far. That's too much, because that's just so stressful on yourself and your body. But to just do something like, okay, today I'm going to do this. This is something that I feel a little bit nervous about. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call this person, and I'm going to ask them about this. We can manage those kinds of things without getting way too far outside of our comfort zone. And then what happens, like for me, I have a pretty big comfort zone now. I fly in Alaska, across the wilderness in a single engine helicopter, and I am the only pilot. There's a lot of responsibility there, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable. It just feels like, yeah, I can do this. I know this. But it wouldn't have been that way a long time ago. So, it's just this process of slightly expanding your comfort zone every single day.
Wow. I thought of you, Lorena, doing this show, and just thought, your story would be such an inspiration to teenagers. And, do you have any advice for teens? Because at that age, they're really struggling to find not only their identity, but, they have like a huge life ahead of them. And sometimes that could feel daunting. What advice would you give to teens?
I think it's absolutely a time that can feel daunting. And so I think one thing to do is, you don't need to think about the rest of your life. It's really just what's next. What's the next thing I want to do? And if you look at myself, I'm the perfect example of that. I've already changed careers one time. I have an undergraduate degree in biology. I realized I was never going to be a very good scientist. And so then I went into teaching. So I kind of switched a little bit already. And I enjoy teaching, and I feel great about it being a fallback career for me if I ever wanted to go back into the classroom. But it's not something that I use directly every day. That being said, I never feel like any money is wasted in education. I feel like I use that education every day. It just may not be a direct line that you'll see, but it's something that is important. And so part of my TED Talk I talk about is start before you're ready. And you're never going to have it figured out. You're never going to know exactly where you want to end up. And even if you pick something like, well, I want to be this, it's probably going to switch a little bit along the way. And so, my advice really would be to make your best guess. Just start aiming in what you think is the right direction, and you're going to figure it out along the way.
Sounds pretty reasonable to me. It's really good. Well, thank you very much, Lorena. I appreciate you coming on. It was really helpful to hear your story.
Hey, no problem, Alexis. And I just want to, let your listeners know, like, there have been a ton of people along the way who have helped me with my career, both switching from teaching to helicopters, but within helicopters. And if any of your listeners want to ask me more questions, I'm happy to do that. People have been able to do that for me along the way. And, just find me at Big State Big Life or at Twitter at Big State Big Life. I'm happy to interact and answer more questions.
Wow, that's very generous of you. Thank you very much for, not forgetting the little people.
There are no little people. We're all together here.
Well, this wraps up our show today with Lorena Knapp, professional pilot, coach, speaker, and risk taker. Please visit bigstatebiglife.com to learn more about Lorena. And while you're there, I highly encourage you to sign up for her empowering newsletter. I did. And for those who want to watch Lorena's amazing TEDx talk, you can find her video on our website, and I'll attach the link to my site after this show. Thank you for joining us on the Prep and Polish Radio Show.